Hello, everyone. My name is Becky Moore. I am an academic advisor in the College of Education here at Penn State University. I'm going to share some info on first generation students' biggest fears and how advisors can help alleviate them. To be clear, this is not an advisor specific session. I will say anyone who is not an advisor, if you're just working with students in any way, can really benefit from this session. I will provide some advisor examples, but they can be applicable to more than just advisors. So let's dive in. Oh, what I did this fall is a survey with my first generation students that we had in the College of Ed. And I really just asked them, like, what is their top concern coming to college and being a student? And the survey was done like the first day of school. So most students didn't even get through a week of class yet when they had done the survey. And these are the top 4 answers. So what this means by top 4 is that means that 4% of students said communicating with professors was their number 1 concern. That's their number 1 concern. So it doesn't mean that only 4% of students are concerned about this. Tuition cost was the number 1 concern, which we would say is in like 3rd place. That is also a very common concern among all students that are not first gen students at the university. That is a big concern. The second ranking top concern was missing family and friends and making new friends. 32% of first gen students said this was their number 1 biggest concern coming to college, and how they're going to make new friends or missing their family. And then the number 1 concern, 88% of students said their number 1 concern is managing workload and time. So they're worried about how much time they need to be studying versus doing homework, and how do they have a social life with all of that? How do they manage that workload that's very different from high school to college? That was really the biggest concern. These 4 concerns are kind of the guiding light for our presentation today, and some of the suggestions for what we can do to help alleviate some of these fears really before students even get into the semester. How can we proactively address things that we know students are worried about when they're coming to college? One thing I think it is important to note is these are top concerns of our first generation students that we surveyed, but in general, a couple other top concerns that students have are about different things like, how do I get accommodations? Or how am I going to handle living in a dorm? These are thoughts that didn't even kind of scratch the surface with our first generation students. And I think part of that is important to know because that shows that difference in the first generation students, right? So how many of us maybe lived in a dorm in college, and we probably have stories to tell about dorm life, whether it's our own or our neighbor or a roommate, and some of those experiences. So our continuing generation students are getting these stories from their families or parents who are kind of passing this information down, which is why that is a top concern for students generally coming to college. But first generation students are not getting those stories. They're not hearing about the dorm life. They're not hearing about my roommate randomly left me halfway through first year, which is what happened to me. So different things like that are kind of being left out. So that institutional knowledge and experience is missing for our first generation students. So we're going to try to help kind of close that gap by being proactive in what we do. And one of the best ways to do that is really sharing information, which I'm sure most of you could have guessed that sharing information is a way to counteract those concerns. So what we need to talk about is what we're going to share and how are we going to share that. Like, we want it to be effective and not overload students. So what kind of things do we want to share? Student aid and scholarships, right? That's going to address some of those concerns maybe related to tuition and the cost of paying for school. We could share information on how to get involved. So it could be like Org Central, campus fairs. There's different resources, especially as you get to know a student. Maybe there is something that they want to be like a little bit more involved in. So that's the type of information we could be sharing. And then tutoring resources, which really address that first concern of how am I going to manage my time? How do I make the transition from high school level work to college level work? And Penn State has a lot of resources for this. We have Penn State Learning. advisor or faculty have office hours, which we should explain to our first-gen students. Our office hours are for students to go, not, it doesn't just mean that your professor is working during those hours. That students are encouraged to go to office hours. And we have writing centers at Penn State. We have EPIC at Penn State, like EPPIC, which is a center where they focus on professional writing and using English in professional writing settings, which is a great resource for a lot of our international students who also might be first gen. But it's also a really good resource for those students who are concerned about talking to their professors, because EPIC offers a session focused just on how do I email my instructors and how to communicate that. So resources like that we should be sharing. As people who work at the university, we automatically have more institutional knowledge than any of our first gen students that are coming in. So being able to share those resources is important. The big question is, how do we effectively share those resources? So I'm gonna ask you a couple questions to start thinking about. First, bulletin boards, right? We have lots of different types of bulletin boards. Some of them are in communal spaces. Some of them are in shared offices. You might have your own place in your office where students are coming that you're posting information, but how are you using that bulletin board, right? Is it just like random flyers randomly posted from all the different centers? Or is it more organized? Maybe there's a spot for like, I need help with academics. I want some financial aid help. Maybe we could sort it in different areas and kind of divide it up based on what their concern is rather than being so overwhelming at once. Also thinking about like, what are we putting on those bulletin boards? And the flyers that we're putting on the bulletin boards, are they communicating correctly or appropriately for the generation that we're talking about? And what can we use to make that easier? So one example is on my bulletin board in my office, I have QR codes. I use QR codes for a lot of different things, and it's really, really easy and it's instant access for students if you're using a QR code. So students will come in and ask me, how do I find scholarships? And I tell them how the Office of Student Aid posts scholarships on their social media. So I have a QR code for the social media page or for Instagram for the Office of Student Aid. So I'm like, oh, if you just scan the QR code, just follow them and you'll see all the scholarships. And I can even show them on their phone if they want me to. So that's about 10 seconds of time. And instantly they're going to be following the Office of Student Aid, which is great for many reasons other than just scholarships. But they also are continuing to post them. So they're going to see it continuing to pop up, right? Which is important. It's something that we're going to keep having them think about. So QR codes, I strongly encourage if you're using them effectively. How are your flyers looking, right? The second question there, are flyers generation appropriate? So Gen Z learns and reads by doing more like chunking and skimming. They don't want to read paragraphs. Too long didn't read is a real thing. I'm sure for some of us too, but also for our students. So when we're putting out information or making flyers, we should be thinking more like Canva, which is like a platform where I can make something pretty. I can use maybe some bullet points or some graphics or diagrams, something like that to make it easily digestible and take less than a minute or maybe even less than 30 seconds to read and absorb the information that is in front of me. One example of this that I learned this year is we always send an email at our college to be like, hey, don't forget to schedule an appointment with your advisor prior to scheduling. And we always have students who schedule, but we also have students who miss it. So I decided to do a follow-up this year and I made a little Canva flyer that was just like schedule an appointment and a little tip related to that. So basically 2 bullet points and some pictures. And I sent it out and suddenly I had a whole new influx of students who now scheduled an appointment with me who didn't read the first one, right? So doing things like that, like how am I making my things generation appropriate so that students are actually getting that information, make it short and sweet, right? Visually appealing is all a bonus, right? So thinking about some of that stuff and then sending resources. This takes me back to like the very beginning because the goal is how can we alleviate some of these challenges that students are feeling as they're coming in. So right after new student orientation, when is the next time most of us talk to students? Probably when they come to our office because they have a problem or they need to just cancel a class or drop a class or something like that. But I try to be really proactive in reaching out to them first. So every new student that is assigned to me, I send an email to. I briefly, like 2 sentences, briefly introduce myself and who I am. And then I just have like an FAQ little like page where I put like a brief question that students might commonly ask and a short answer for it. So it could be, how do I find out about financial aid? Here's a link to the Office of Student Aid. Schedule an appointment on this page. It could be, how do I get involved? Here's a link to Org Central. What do I do if I have a disability? Right? So this is a question that I mentioned earlier. Our first gen students aren't always thinking about because it's something that maybe they're assuming their IEP carries over or something along those lines. So I try to put different types of questions in there, especially thinking first gen students don't know what they don't know. So they don't know to ask about student disability resources. So I offer that information. Again, I'm not doing paragraphs. I'm not doing anything long. It's literally just FAQ, question answer with some bullet points. And on top of that, I bold the important words from the questions. So if I even have a student who doesn't want to read each question, which you know is going to happen, I will bold the important words. So I might bold like involvement or disability, financial aid, so they can just skim through and be like, oh, disability, wait, I need that. Okay, I need to know about that. And they didn't even have to like read anything. They just looked for the bold words. So thinking about how we're formatting those emails, thinking about how we're using our words and how can we shorten it and different things like that. And AI is something that could really help in this area, but I'm not going to dive into that right now. So sharing information. 2 resources specifically that I want to share that Penn State has that I would throw out there for our first gen students are the Study Smarter workshops, which are offered through Penn State Learning. It really addresses that number one concern that students have. How do I study? Right? How much time can I put into studying? These workshops are a really great way. They're interactive. You can ask questions, but it also talks about like, how does your brain absorb information? How are you going to be able to take notes most effectively? What is the best way to study so that you don't have to keep studying for 7 hours and then feel that you've learned nothing? And how to overcome some of those concerns related to studying. So I definitely recommend those. They're web. They offer them every semester. Another resource I want to share is something that's kind of first gen specific. Most of you know about the Student Success Center because you're here, but the Journey Success Center is something new as of fall 2024. It is a new center that has started. It's not just for first gen, but it does have a strong focus on first generation students. And students can go in and they can meet with peer advisors to ask questions about like, how did you get an apartment off campus, or did you do study abroad, or whatever they want to ask about. But they also have sessions right now that they're running where students can go in and just learn how to run a degree audit and what kind of questions should I ask my advisor before meeting with them to schedule. So just different general information that students might need to really support and find success. Right now, it is by referral only. I did put the QR code there, though, so that you can learn more about it. And that program is hopefully going to grow and grow into new spaces and different things like that. But as of right now, it's kind of new, which is why it's referral only. So all of that, I want to discuss one last focus area, which addresses that second concern of the students missing their family and how to make friends. We talked a little bit about getting involved and using Org Central and attending the fairs, or maybe your college has a fair, but missing a family member is something that you can't just replace. So instead, we need to become part of their college family, right? You have your college family and you have your at-home family, and your college family consists of a lot of friends, hopefully, but it also needs someone to just be like a guide or an ear to hear them out, or someone that maybe they want to run something past that's more like in an adult than maybe a 20-year-old, right? So that's up to us as staff members, as faculty members. Are we truly being a member of their college family? So are we asking them when we meet with them, how are they doing, right? Or tell me what you did this weekend, or what's going on with you? Just asking something that's not immediately diving into business, right? When they come in, I shouldn't immediately be like, all right, these are the classes we're taking for fall. I'm not going to get to know my student that way, and they're not going to build a rapport with me. Another thing to consider is tone and attention. So the way that we say things, both verbally and maybe our facial expressions will matter. We need to make sure that we're paying attention. We shouldn't be checking our email while we're talking to a student next to us. Another aspect of this also has to do with how cognizant are we of our body language and what our body language might be saying to that student. And are they comfortable asking us questions? I know sometimes people get annoyed when a student will ask a question and you're like, oh, it's on the first page of your line path, right? Like if you just log in, it's on the first page right in front of your face. Or if you just click on it, it tells you what to do next. But instead of thinking of those questions and responding or thinking in that way, it should be more of like, that student's comfortable enough to ask me that question, right? That student feels safe enough in my space to ask questions is really the positive takeaway there. Because I remember as a first gen student when I was in college, I didn't ask my advisor anything, especially because they were a faculty member as well. I asked them like nothing, the bare minimum, because I didn't want to feel dumb or like I'm the only person who doesn't know this. So I either went without knowing or I asked maybe some of my friends. But otherwise, I was not comfortable asking my advisor different questions, and I don't want students to come into my space feeling like that. So that transitions us to my last little point about your space and the space that's around you. Think about your office. Okay, think about what implicit messages you are maybe sending just based on what is maybe hanging in your office or sitting on your desk. If a student came into your office and was in there by themselves, say for 2 minutes because you were running late or whatever the reason is, if they're sitting in there looking around your office, what are they going to learn about you based on your space, right? They're sitting in that office talking to you the whole time anyways, so they're absorbing what is around them. They might learn that maybe you have a master's degree. Okay, that's great. They might learn that maybe you have children. They might learn that you have an interest in something. Maybe you have like an Eagle Scout thing sitting up on your dresser. Maybe you have a trophy from a sport or something like that that you played, which is great. Those are great ways to connect and really kind of show that you're a human too and build that family relationship to become their part of their college family. I also hang in my office. I have like first gen pins and first gen advocate and LGBTQ pins and different things like that just to show like I'm here to accept you no matter what. And you can see that without me having to tell you just by like what is in my space, right? And implicit messages that I'm maybe sending in my space. So thinking about all of those things, we really do want to be a member of their college family, and especially first gen students who are more afraid really of missing that family life and not sure what they're getting into because they didn't have someone to tell them about all these great experiences from when they were in college. So some of our key takeaways, our top two concerns that students are really having is managing classwork and time and missing their family and finding friends and family here. So what can we do? We can reach out early with effective resources, right? Thinking about using QR codes or making it like chunking and skimming. Think students are reading in that way. Becoming a member of their college family. Thinking about implicit messages that we may be sending either through our office space or verbal messages or tones that we might be pushing out. And continuing to take steps forward to get more involved. Volunteer to be on a committee or a community. Create your own peer advising for first gen committee at your college or within your major, or have a little group get together for the first gen students in this major, or just doing little things like that. Find other people in your space who care about the same things as you do, because then you could do it as a team and it's more fun, especially when it's not necessarily something you're going to get paid extra for. And as always, you're all here for personal professional development. This is a great step for really continuing to find ways that we can support those first gen students and make them feel welcomed as soon as they are accepted, right? Reaching out and being proactive rather than waiting for them to come to you with a problem. So all of that said, I want to thank you all very much. And if you have anything that you need from me, feel free to send me an email and I'll be happy to reply. Have a great afternoon and enjoy the rest of the summit.